I invite Dr. Itai Sne, Associate Professor of History for World Civilizations, Human Rights, International Law, Department of History, John Jay College of Criminal Justice at the City University of New York, to come up and moderate this. And actually, we are missing James Aroni Miraggio, so it will only be one presenter. And also, if you need the hidden people behind the screen to change the slides, just please say that clearly so that they can hear you. It's a little bit hard to hear back there.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real privilege to be here. It's wonderful people. When I see this crowd, I know what the meaning heaven on earth means. And I'm happy to moderate the panel Religious Conflict Resolution and Sustainable Development. And I gathered member George-Genyi is here, and his talk, he's from the Department of Political Science, Benue State University of Makurdi in Nigeria. I think he's from the same place the nice lady who spoke before is from, pardon me. And his talk will be about globalization, reconstructing religious identities for development. Thank you.
Good afternoon, co-participants at this very important conference. I would like to join my voice to those who have presented before to thank the organizers of this conference for inviting me in to also share my thoughts on this very important topic, theme for this year's conference, which talks about faith and interfaith dialogue. My topic, as has been introduced before, is globalization, reconstructing religious identities for development. The few very first comments I want to make is to say that there is a relationship between globalization and religion, and to also say that in the literature, there are two contending positions about the concept of globalization. The first has to do with the fact that globalization is seen as a contemporary phenomenon. The second is to the extent that globalization actually has a history to it, and that it is actually a stage of development in the life of capitalism. And so for this presentation, we want to say that the phenomenon of globalization has actually gained currency in contemporary scholarship and has actually drawn the attention of nations, of national leaders and opinion leaders. And that one thing that is very clear is about the fact that it's a multidimensional concept or phenomenon which had varied implications for societies and for individuals. That it has certain elements, one of which is that by the instrumentality of communication and transportation and technology and the media, globalization has actually continued to contribute to rolling back the frontiers of state and blurring of geographical spaces and boundaries and the consequences that arise from that for both nations and for societies. It is to this extent that the world is today referred to as a global village where people, cultures, and identities interact regularly by the very instrumentality, especially of the element of communication, where what happens in a particular environment today just now becomes news in other environments. Like I said earlier, there's an aspect of globalization that is very interesting to us, and that is the breaking down of national economic boundaries and the spread of trade, finance, and production, and also the activities of transnational corporations and international finance institutions. In all of this, what we have tried to also put across is that globalization has a history to it, and this has interfaced advanced countries of today and developing societies of Africa and Asia over the past 5 centuries, right from the 16th century through trade and productive activities, especially during the colonial period. What we'll be doing at this presentation often likely is to see it in its contemporary form and the kind of things that have actually, the kind of forces that have driven that process. We viewed with concern and appreciation the fact that in contemporary times, because of the process of globalization, it can actually be viewed as an interdependent process associated with peace and progress, increasingly with democracy, and that as the world becomes more interdependent on one another, decisions are made as a collective whole in all fields of human endeavor, not just the independent political state. Like I said earlier, next slide, as I said earlier, we will talk about religion and religious identities. We all know that religion, it's a very powerful force. It is powerful in some societies, it's less powerful in other societies. It is more powerful in its influence in other societies is quite negligible. But what we must note is that in all of this, religion has continued to, impact on the lives of the people and as they relate one with the other. Upon 2013, for instance, sees religion as a feeling of man's absolute dependence, encouraged by his sense of inadequate protection, provision, sustenance, and supremacy, thus invoking a sense of dependence on a supreme being. This underpins the essence of people's identifying with religions, different religions. I mean, this arises from man's recognition of his limitations. There are certain things that happen to us that we are unable to rationally explain them, but we seek to understand and appreciate them because of our dependence on a particular force. For instance, we are unable to explain very well the origin of man, the origin and even cause of death, life after death, and so on and so forth. There are life puzzles that we are unable to explain, and often we seek their understanding in our association and I believe with a higher being. In view of the above definitions, religion appears to deal with the inexplicable relationship between man and the divine, being a mundane being and transcendental being. We'll go straight to look at globalization and religious identity. And we note that religion and globalization have engaged in a persistently flexible relationship in which the former relies on the latter for its thriving and flourishing, while at the same time challenging its hybridizing effect. We know that religion has actually been affected by changes that have been brought about by globalization. This has resulted, like we said earlier, in making the world a small village where people and cultures and identities come in daily face-to-face contact with each other. Sahlberg notes that globalization has two macro-level paradoxical effects on our daily lives. And the first is that it simultaneously both integrates and segregates. It integrates world cultures through the global communication networks and less restricted movements of individuals. At the same time, it creates a tension between those who are benefiting more and those who may be marginalized by the market values and consumer cultures that are typical to many societies, especially in the areas that suffer from poverty or slower development. Next page shows us the division of the world religions in that graphic presentation. But historically, religion has been influenced by the process and calls of globalization. Like we said earlier, evolving trade routes led to the colonization of Asia, Africa, Central and South America, right from the 16th century, when the Portuguese traders and merchants set foot on the African soil. They were followed by religious crusaders, and thus religion became an integral part of colonialism and later on globalization. Today, most religions operate outside of their traditional milieus and are embraced in such new areas, all with the influence of communication as an element of globalization. You know, Art Short makes it clear that accelerated globalization of recent times has enabled core religionists across the planet to have greater contact with one another. And being a source of identity and pride, religion is always promoted by its practitioners to reach the levels of globality and be embraced by as many people as possible. And that's why, for instance, Muslims aspire to establish the Islamic Ummah, which is a community of believers. Christianity lays claims to its universal appeal. And of course, information technology at the disposal of these religions has contributed considerably to their emergence, their revivalism, and then fortification. Religious identity negotiation and reconstruction for development. Well, it's becoming very apparent that nations need to live in peace. This is the point that we have continued to make at this conference. This is because we believe that this affords society greater progress and development. In a world of diversities, cutting across political, social, cultural, economic, and religious diversities, tolerance and accommodation by all becomes very imperative. Otherwise, chaos and conflicts will become the defining feature of our own existence. So this, therefore, is an imperative for tolerance. We have talked about this since yesterday. And we know that there is passive tolerance, which means accepting differences as factual, that they are part of us. There is also the active tolerance, which means involving with others in the midst of differences and variations. The outcome of tolerance is living side by side peacefully and accepting variations that exist. It's actually a reciprocal process between two counterparts. And in our situation, we'll talk about different religions coexisting in a particular society. Most world religions preach tolerance. In Christianity, tolerance, either in social or religious claims, is categorized in good manners, as is indicated in the Holy Bible. If we read the book of the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9, 38 to 40, for instance, where Jesus forbids the Apostle John from stopping a man who dispelled evil spirits from another, that one who is with us certainly cannot be against us. For Buddhism, Dharma tolerance is known as Dita. That is supposed to be highlighted with apostrophes. And the teachings of these doctrines are necessarily based on not just good moral character, but good moral tolerance. For Sikhism, the act of hating human beings, whereas at the same time, worshiping God is totally unacceptable, because the religion teaches that to know God is through the relationship among other creatures. So based on the above, it is clear that the element of tolerance is pervasive in most religions. In Surah Al-Muntahana 68, our Quran explains that justice and goodwill towards others who are of different convictions is one of the main conditions that brought about tolerance. Unfortunately, we know that we live in a world where, in spite of this, the world has experienced a lot of religious conflict arising from intolerance of adherents of other faiths by others. In the period 1980 to 1995 alone, the world witnessed 72 civil wars, which were expressed in ethnic, national, religious, and racial grounds. Of course, this has not really subsided. From 1995, aggressions with conflicts involving different religions and religion-linked terrorist attacks in Kosovo, Lebanon, Morocco, Egypt, Afghanistan, Kenya, Nigeria, Ethiopia, etc., have expressed in interdenominational conflicts and religion-linked terrorist attacks, in spite of the spread of the concern for tolerance and peaceful coexistence. So religion-based conflicts have been on the rise, and globalization and its elements has brought the consequences and implications of all of these to nations, even nations other than where these have taken place. So the world has thus become more and more multicultural, with attendant consequences and implications of these conflicts to other nations via integration, which is an element of globalization. Now, but the task for us is strengthening religious cooperation for development in a globalized world. We have said that religious identities have not been immune from the challenges and effects of globalization. What globalization has done is it has increased the spread of religions on a global scale by providing a context for revival and resurgence. Adherents of the different faiths have utilized the instrumentality of the current wave of information and technological advancement to promote and entrench their religions. In Nigeria, for instance, there has been the Christian-Muslim Dialogue Initiative, and this has been quite significant in trying to build trust and respect, cooperation of humanitarian grounds, theological exchanges, and so on. We note the dialogue that has been promoted by the Catholic Church since 1960 with the Vatican II and the World Council of Churches. So, but it's estimated that more than 2/3 of the world's population identifies with a religion. So if this is so, then it's trying to ensure that religious harmony exists is a task that all of us must ensure to be part of. At the time where the world has become a global village, engaging religion and key religious actors in conflict settings can provide unique opportunities to intervene and provide meaning, identity and emotional support, empathy and compassion that can sustain reconciliation and problem solving across divisions, promoting values, norms, and motivations for non-violent approaches to raising and confronting differences. Dialogue and cooperation between religions is important. I just want to take two quotations to highlight the urgency for dialogue, cooperation, and peaceful coexistence. The first is taken from an address made by Pope Benedict XVI to ambassadors from Muslim countries in 2006, in which he said, and I want to quote him verbatim, "Interreligious and intercultural dialogue between Christians and Muslims cannot be reduced to an optional extra. It is in fact a vital necessity on which in large measure our future depends." The second quotation is a letter signed by 137 Muslim scholars and leaders from across the Muslim world and sent to Christian leaders in 2007. And that reads, "Muslims and Christians together make up over half the world's population. Without peace and justice between these two communities, there can be no meaningful peace in the world. The future of the world depends on peace between Muslims and Christians," end of quote. It's on this note that we want to conclude with the strong position that interreligious, interfaith dialogue is extremely very important for our world because development, for instance, cannot actually take place in a situation of chaos. We have seen what religious conflicts have done to nations, especially for us in Africa, where development has not actually been experienced by the people. The little efforts that have been made has unfortunately been destroyed by religious conflicts. And so we note in this paper that globalization is a process which is systematically restructuring interactive phases among nations by breaking down barriers in the areas of culture, commerce, and so on, information and communication. We also know that it has been associated with explosion in information and technological advancement, and this has impacted on all aspects of the lives of the people and nations globally. We've also noted that globalization and religion have experienced flexible relationship, impacting each other in profound ways. Though religions still have their specific territorial origins and spaces, by the fact of a globalized world, they have been exported to other climes as well and practiced by people of other cultures and society. Religion has continued to assert its identity in the light of this. We still know that we belong to our particular faith in spite of the interaction that has been caused by the very factor of communication and technology. So we conclude that while maintaining some peculiar levels of exclusivities, that's these religions, the leaders of world religions can actually take advantage of information technology and the media available to the workings of globalization and seek to promote religious tolerance and accommodation. Because this is necessary for peaceful coexistence and a just society where human progress and indeed development can be achieved. Interreligious dialogue alongside other peace-building strategies are vital and sensitive to achieving national development via religious harmony. So this is the position of this paper, that we will have to continue to reckon with the fact that different religions exist, and adherents and leaders of these religions have continued to promote their own religions in the midst of other contending religions. But we also note that for peaceful coexistence to continue to exist and for development which all societies seek to be achieved, there is the need to play along the side of sensitivity to others' religion to achieve national development, which is very important for all nations. I thank you for listening.